When we evaluate enterprise AI deployments today, the conversation is, well, it's almost exclusively dominated by capabilities, right?
Right, yeah, like context windows and inference speed.
Exactly. Massive investments in compute. But our mission today is to decode a completely different reality. I want to start this deep dive with a data point from a 2024 McKinsey analysis that, honestly, it should fundamentally alter how you view your tech stack.
Oh, this is a big one.
Yeah, here it is. 95% of Gen AI projects fail to deliver a measurable return on investment.
95%? It's wild.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this. Because that figure usually prompts an immediate technical diagnosis from engineering teams, right?
Yeah, the assumption is always that the retrieval augmented generation pipeline is flawed, or, the foundation models are just suffering from unacceptable hallucination rates.
Right. They blame the tech.
Exactly. But when you actually look at the mechanics of these failures, the bottleneck is rarely the model's capability.
So what is it?
The projects are failing because they cannot survive contact with production environments without triggering massive compliance and operational risks.
And that brings us to our focus today. We are unpacking an analysis from AetherLink, they're a Dutch AI consulting firm, to understand exactly why that failure rate is so high.
Yeah, and this is incredibly relevant for European business leaders, CTOs, and developers who are evaluating AI adoption right now.
Right. Our goal is to give you the playbook to turn regulatory compliance from a perceived cost center into your core competitive advantage. Because, well, there's a very specific timeline attached to this.
A ticking clock, essentially. August 2, 2026.
Okay, so what happens then?
That is the deadline for full enforcement of the EAI Act. For enterprises, particularly in tech corridors like Eindhoven or just the broader European market, delaying the maturation of your AI governance is an existential operational threat.
Existential is a strong word, but the numbers back it up.
Oh, absolutely. We're looking at penalties that scale up to 75 million euros or 1.5% of global annual revenue, whichever is higher.
Wow. I look at a penalty that massive, and my immediate thought is that it applies to the providers, like the companies training those trillion parameter models.
Yeah, but that's the trap. The Act targets deployers as well.
Yeah.
If an enterprise integrates an external AI model into their internal workflows, they carry immense liability.
So I want to bridge the gap between that heavy regulation and the 95% failure rate we talked about, because intuitively you would assume layering heavy regulation onto a software project it slows it down and kills the ROI, doesn't it?
The opposite is actually proving true in practice. To understand why, we have to define what the EU AI Act classifies as high risk.
Okay.
It is not about generative text or harmless chatbots. Annex 3 of the Act specifically targets systems determining material outcomes for human beings.
So what does that look like on the ground?
Well, if your enterprise is deploying AI for recruitment screening or employee performance prediction, credit scoring, healthcare diagnostics...
Critical infrastructure too, right?
Right, exactly. Management of power grids, logistics networks. If you're doing any of that, you are operating high-risk AI.
Which means the technical requirements shift dramatically. I always compare it to building a Ferrari but refusing to install a dashboard or brakes.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right, like it looks fast, but without the data quality testing and oversight mechanisms, you are guaranteed to crash. You can't just spin up an API endpoint and call it a day.
No, you really can't. A high-risk classification legally requires rigorous data quality testing, continuous risk assessments, explainability metrics, and comprehensive human-in-the-loop workflows.
And most companies just don't have that yet.
What's fascinating here is that infrastructure is entirely absent in the vast majority of current deployments. Research indicates that while AI absorbs roughly 40% of enterprise IT budgets right now, only 15% of those organizations possess actual AI governance maturity.
Only 15%.
Yeah. The remaining 85% are stuck in this cycle of rogue deployments. A developer integrates an open source model to speed up a workflow, or a department buys a SaaS tool with embedded AI, and none of it is logged in a centralized risk register.
It's like a corporate immune system.
Oh, okay.
The innovation, the new AI model, is introduced to the host body. If the enterprise has a weak immune system, meaning no governance, that innovation mutates. It starts hallucinating, or it exhibits bias, or ingests restricted data.
Right.
And eventually, the business catches on, panics, and rips the entire system out. That is how you end up with a 95% failure rate. The models don't fail technically. They get rejected by the business because they cannot be trusted.
Yeah, that immune system analogy really holds up when you look at the maturity framework AetherLink uses to diagnose these companies. It is a five-stage progression.
Okay, let's walk through that because you only have about 18 months left until that 2026 deadline. You need a roadmap to get out of that Ferrari without brakes phase.
Exactly. So level 1 is ad hoc. This is the shadow AI we just discussed. Isolated pilots, zero documentation, complete regulatory exposure.
And from a developer's perspective, level 1 feels incredibly fast. You're just writing code and seeing results.
But you are building up technical and legal debt at an astonishing rate. Moving to level 2 introduces basic documentation. You might have like a static spreadsheet listing the AI tools in use, but no active enforcement mechanisms.
Where do most companies sit right now?
Most enterprises we see operating in European tech hubs are currently stuck fluctuating between level 1 and level 2.
Got it.
Level 3 is the critical threshold. They classify this as managed. This is where policies transition from static documents into active MLOps pipelines.
Meaning automated audit logging, defined human-in-the-loop triggers, and foundational compliance with the Act.
Right. It goes all the way up to level 5, which is autonomous governance, but level 3 is that foundational baseline you need right now.
But the leap to level 3 requires a fundamental shift in business case engineering. Because the AetherLink analysis points out that for a high-risk system, an enterprise has to allocate 30 to 40% of the total project cost strictly to governance infrastructure.
Yep, that's the reality.
That means budgeting for bias testing, dedicated oversight staffing, and continuous monitoring tools. If I am a CTO presenting a budget to my board, slapping a 40% governance premium on a project sounds like a fantastic way to get the initiative canceled. Doesn't that kill innovation?
The math dictates a different narrative, actually. It is true that building the required governance infrastructure extends the ROI timeline.
Right.
A governed, compliant project typically requires 18 to 24 months to demonstrate positive returns. That's compared to the 12 to 18 months promised by an ungoverned pilot. But the critical metric is the survival rate.
Okay, lay it on me.
Projects that incorporate that upfront governance boast a 78% success rate in production.
Wow. Compared to the 5% success rate of those shadow AI deployments we mentioned earlier, that completely flips the perception of governance. It is not a regulatory tax, it's an insurance policy on your engineering time. You are spending 30% more upfront to guarantee the remaining 70% of your investment doesn't get shut down by a compliance officer a year later.
That's spot on.
Yeah.
Let's apply this to a tangible environment, because the abstract concepts of risk classification often mask how easily a system can cross the line into high-risk territory.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because AetherLink details a mid-sized semiconductor firm in Eindhoven in their report.
Right? 800 employees operating across multiple facilities.
And in late 2024, they were running 5 disparate AI projects.
Yeah.
Classic level 1 fragmentation. They had customized machine learning models predicting energy loads, third-party generative models optimizing supply chains, and a localized computer vision system deployed on the manufacturing line for defect detection.
And that defect detection system is where the hidden danger was lurking. On the surface, training a localized edge model to visually inspect silicon wafers for physical flaws is fundamentally low risk.
Sure, it evaluates inanimate objects.
Right. But the architecture of their data pipeline created a massive liability. The data from that camera system wasn't just staying on the factory floor.
No, and this is where it all goes wrong. The defect logs were being pushed into the manufacturing execution system, which fed into the enterprise's central ERP platform.
Amen.
From there, management was pulling that data into an HR dashboard to evaluate which specific workers were associated with the highest defect rates during their shifts.
Which changes everything. The moment that operational data touched the employee evaluation process, the entire technical stack underwent a semantic drift in its purpose.
Yep.
Under the EU AI Act and GDPR Article 22, which governs automated decision-making, that simple camera system instantly became a high-risk algorithmic management tool.
It was now indirectly dictating employment outcomes, and it had zero built-in explainability or bias mitigation for that use case. The model weights were optimized to find scratches on silicon, not to account for the fact that a worker might be assigned to a malfunctioning machine that causes more defects.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If a worker gets penalized or fired based on that dashboard, the company is in direct violation of the act. They were sitting on a compliance bomb, and not a single developer had intended to build an HR tool.
Which is terrifying. But this is exactly why the AetherLink roadmap begins with a comprehensive readiness scan, right? Using their EtherMindy strategy framework.
Yeah, The first 3 months for this semiconductor firm were dedicated solely to risk classification and stakeholder alignment. They had to map the entire data lineage to understand where factory data intersected with human resources.
And then months 4 through 6 involved building the actual audit logging infrastructure. They used AetherDV methodologies to integrate compliance directly into the development cycle.
Right. They implemented a human-in-the-loop workflow. So the defect data could not automatically trigger an HR penalty without a floor manager reviewing the context of the shift.
The outcomes of reaching level 3 maturity extended far beyond avoiding regulatory fines, though.
Oh, absolutely.
By inserting that human oversight and running bias audits on the evaluation dashboard, the firm measured a 12% reduction in hiring and evaluation bias. And they avoided, what, 2.3 million euros in potential penalties?
Yep, 2.3 million. And more impressively, when they applied this governed approach to their supply chain optimization project, they saw an 18% improvement in overall ROI.
Wait, I want to break down the mechanism behind that 18% improvement. How does governance actually extract more value from a supply chain model?
Well, it comes down to bounding the AI's action space. In an ungoverned state, a supply chain model might predict a massive spike in component demand and autonomously generate purchase orders. But if the model is hallucinating based on anomalous market data, you suddenly have millions of euros tied up in unnecessary inventory. Governance forces you to define confidence thresholds.
Oh, I see.
If the model's confidence in the demand spike falls below a certain percentage, the system cannot execute the purchase order autonomously. It routes it to a human procurement officer. By preventing those cascade errors, the baseline efficiency of the system skyrockets.
That structural reliability also addresses the human element. The case study noted a 35% reduction in adoption friction among the employees.
Makes sense.
Hmm.
When you deploy a black box AI that penalizes workers without explanation, the workforce actively subverts the system. They find workarounds.
Of course they do.
But when you implement explainable AI and conduct actual change management, the employees trust the tools and use them to augment their workflow.
And looking ahead, establishing that trust is the only way an enterprise will be able to scale. We are transitioning rapidly past basic generative chat interfaces into the deployment of fully autonomous multi-agent systems.
Digital colleagues, basically. The Etherbot product line is a great example of this. Shift digital colleagues designed to autonomously negotiate supplier contracts, or manage dynamic logistics routing, or conduct quality assurance at scale.
But scaling autonomous agents introduces an entirely new level of risk. You cannot rely on an ad hoc IT committee to monitor a fleet of digital colleagues making thousands of micro-decisions a minute.
No, you need structure. The solution proposed here is the establishment of an AI Center of Excellence.
Okay, but for a mid-market enterprise, an AI co-E sounds huge.
It does, but it doesn't mean hiring a monolithic department of 50 compliance lawyers and machine learning researchers. It is fundamentally about centralizing the governance standards while decentralizing the actual innovation.
Got it.
You need a dedicated, albeit small, internal team responsible for maintaining the risk assessment templates, defining the acceptable data architectures, and managing vendor compliance.
The immediate challenge for a company in Eindhoven or Utrecht is acquiring the talent to lead that center of excellence, though. A full-time chief AI officer with deep expertise in both EU regulatory law and MLOps architecture is incredibly expensive and, honestly, difficult to source.
Which is why the strategic workaround discussed in the analysis is fractional AI leadership.
Explain how that works.
It's a highly efficient utilization of the regional talent pool. You bring in an external AI lead architect on a fractional part-time basis. You leverage an expert who has built compliant systems at scale to design your internal governance frameworks and train your core team.
Okay, so they set the foundation.
Exactly. Once the architecture is stable and the AetherMind strategy is embedded, the fractional leader steps back and your internal staff maintains the operational cadence.
That solves the internal capability gap nicely. But there is a massive external vulnerability we need to dissect here.
Yeah.
Vendor risk and data sovereignty. Because if your newly established center of excellence evaluates a supply chain agent, and that agent relies on an API call to a massive US-based foundation model, how does the EU AI Act view that relationship?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Act places a heavy burden of liability on the deployer. If you pipe your enterprise data through a US-based cloud model, you face significant sovereignty hurdles.
Meaning GDPR comes into play.
Yes. Under GDPR and the AI Act, you must be able to verify where the training data resides, how your prompts are being utilized, and whether the model output complies with European bias standards.
So can that overseas vendor cryptographically prove the lineage of their pre-training data set to a European regulator?
In most cases, they cannot. Their data sets are proprietary black boxes. If a regulator demands an audit of the foundation model powering your HR screening tool, and your U.S. vendor refuses to open their architecture, the enterprise deploying the tool pays the penalty.
Which brings us back to that 75 million euro fine.
Exactly. This liability is driving a massive strategic pivot toward European sovereign AI solutions. Enterprises handling critical infrastructure or sensitive PII are increasingly rotating away from closed U.S. APIs.
What are the alternatives then?
They are adopting models from European developers like Mistral AI or Aleph Alpha, which are designed with regulatory compliance as a baseline.
And crucially, they are deploying these open-weight models on-premise or within highly controlled European cloud environments. The technical overhead of running a local RAG architecture is absolutely worth the investment.
Without a doubt, when you control the hardware and you control the model weights, you dictate the data lineage. You aren't relying on a third-party vendor's data processing agreement to protect you.
And it sounds like the vendor ecosystem will undergo a brutal consolidation over the next 18 months because of this. Oh, definitely. If a third-party SaaS tool cannot explicitly certify how their embedded AI complies with the EU AI Act, they are going to be ripped out of enterprise tech stacks. If you don't systematically address these sovereignty questions today, you are inviting massive vendor lock-in that will require a panicked, incredibly expensive migration in early 2026.
We have covered a tremendous amount of operational architecture today, from diagnosing the true cause of that 95% failure rate to the realities of fractional leadership in on-premise deployments.
It's a lot to process.
It is. So what does this all mean? My primary takeaway from analyzing this AetherLink roadmap is the absolute necessity of reframing the business case for AI.
Tell me more about that.
We have to stop viewing governance as a secondary compliance checklist. It is the core engineering foundation. That 30 to 40% upfront investment in audit logs, human-in-the-loop interfaces, and data sovereignty, that is the only mechanism that ensures an AI deployment scales securely without destroying operational integrity. I couldn't agree more. The mechanical reality of compliance is that it enforces good software engineering.
What's your top takeaway?
For me, it's the severe urgency of the timeline. Do not wait for the 2026 deadline to initiate a readiness scan. Audit your entire vendor pipeline right now. Map the data lineage of every system on your factory floor and ensure it isn't quietly informing a high-risk decision in another department.
Like the defect detection camera.
Exactly. This raises an important question. Can your current third-party tools certify EU AI Act compliance? Because August 2026 will expose everyone who isn't ready. The enterprises that achieve level 3 maturity today will be scaling autonomous agents seamlessly, while their competitors are paralyzed by regulatory audits.
The window to secure that competitive advantage is closing rapidly. For more AI insights, visit etherlink.ai. But I want to leave you with one final structural scenario to consider.
Let's hear it.
We explored the mechanics of bounding an autonomous supply chain agent to keep it compliant. As these multi-agent systems become the standard, what happens when your perfectly governed, internally compliant digital colleague initiates a complex contract negotiation with a non-compliant hallucinating agent from one of your external vendors?
Oh, wow.
If their rogue system injects toxic data or forces an unexplainable error into the transaction, how does your immune system isolate that external threat without breaking the supply chain? Who absorbs the liability when machines fail to understand each other's boundaries? Keep examining the architecture and keep asking the hard questions.